The style of the building that we're in now is a neo-Romanesque style with rounded windows and rounded arches. But the architect was very aware that he was building in a Roman style because it's neo-Romanesque, but he was building a neo-Romanesque church in Ireland. So everybody who contributed to the church was aware that they were working in a Roman style but in Ireland. And if we look at the floor, which so many of us just walk over without even taking one bit of notice of it, it's in a Roman style. It's made of mosaic, as the Romans made lots of mosaics, but all the designs on the floor are Celtic motifs. Mm-hmm. And as we go around the church, we'll see other examples where these two styles have been blended together. It must have been taken many, many weeks to lay this floor, and we just walk over it without thinking.
This is the house of God.
Yes. Now this is the foundation stone of the church that was made in 1813. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice here, where after the words "this is," there's a blank here. And it says, "This is the house of God." But there used to be words here. It used to say, "This is an awful place, the house of God." And that was in 1813, when awful meant full of awe. But over time, the meaning of the word awful changed. So I presume in around the 1960s, when they were resetting this foundation stone in this place, they decided to take out the words awful place. So it simply now reads, "The house of God." This is the house of God. And it tells us who built the church, which priest was here in 1813 when this church was made. It was put up by the Most Reverend Oliver Kelly. And Oliver Kelly went on to be Archbishop of Tuam.
So the ceiling is...
So anybody who walks into St. Mary's has to be impressed by the size of the church. In a way, it's way too big for a small town like Westport. It's almost like a big cathedral. The style, as I said before, is neo-Romanesque, and Romanesque architecture is known for its half-barreled ceiling, which we can see there, the round windows, the rounded arches, and also the domes that we find down by the sanctuary.
Well, the major big dome up in the central altar there, isn't there?
Yes, exactly. And the pillars, huge, strong pillars, and in a way they speak to us of the strength and the power and the permanence of God.
Both the floors and the ceiling had to have redos, did it?
Yes, this Church of St. Mary's, where it is situated, it's on the old route of the river, the Carabeg River, through Westport. It's only been canalised since the early 1800s, but before that it used to run underneath this church. And in 2004 it was discovered that there were actually sinkholes underneath the church, and once they were discovered, of course, they had to be repaired. So in 2004 the whole of the floor of this church was taken up and new supports were put in underneath the floor. It was a massive work, and the parishioners couldn't worship here for about 18 months, I think, while the work was being done, and the terrazzo floor was relaid. And then in 2015, we started to have problems with the ceiling, where plaster was falling off the ceiling, and again that had to be totally investigated, which it has been now, and repaired. And again, the parish had to be evacuated for some time or live in a smaller space while that work was being done. Everything is now completed, but at an enormous cost.
Mm-hmm. And where did the parishioners go when the church was closed?
In 2004, for daily mass, they went down to Holy Trinity, the Church of Ireland, and on Sundays we went up to Rice College into the gym. In 2015, we managed to just curtain off the parts that were needing repair, and we just worshipped in the main nave of the church.
This cross is in an unusual place.
Yes, and I shall explain why. Have a look at this plaque here at the foot of the pillar at the back of the church.
Yeah.
And it's dedicated to the Right Reverend Monsignor Bernard Burke. Bernard Burke was priest in this church from 1821 to 1861. He was here for 40 years of his priesthood. In fact, almost his entire priesthood was spent in this church. He followed closely on after Oliver Kelly. Father Oliver Kelly had gone on to be Archbishop of Tuam. Shortly afterwards, he was replaced by Father Bernard Burke. So he was here in a very turbulent time in the church's history because he was here during the time of the famine. So along with the rector from Holy Trinity Church, he tended the sick, he worked in the workhouse, he tried to help the poor people of Westport as best he could. It was he who set up the first primary school here in Westport, he who sent for the Sisters of Mercy in 1841 to come down and help the people, and particularly help them. They then helped them in the famine years. And he also was instrumental in bringing the Christian Brothers to the church, to the town. So he's very, very influential, and most unusually, he spent all his priesthood here. When he died in 1861, they decided that they wanted to have him in the place he loved the best, which was St. Mary's Church. So they buried him close to the high altar of the church, which in those days was to the left of the pillar where he's noted. And then when they had to lift the floor in 2004, they brought up his remains and they reinterred them under the floor, just beside in front of the final pew of the church. This is where Father Bernard Burke is buried.
So they seem to have got on well with the established church at the time, the Protestant church.
Oh, very
the Church
well,
of Ireland,
very
yeah.
well. In fact, I think one of the rectors of Holy Trinity Church died from famine fever. One of the Sisters of Mercy died from famine fever. They were very, very involved with the poor, both the Holy Trinity and St. Mary's Church.
And the Browns donated the site, did they? Or
The Browns allowed the church to lease land from them for this church, and also made land available so the Convent of Mercy could be built. They were very generous to the Catholic Church.
So there was great cooperation.
Yeah, great
between them all.
cooperation, absolutely.
Of course, the Browns themselves were one-time Catholics, were they?
I think they were.
They were, yeah.
Their
They were
background,
until the 1800s, yeah.
Catholic background,
Reason.
absolutely. Yeah. In 1813, when the original church was erected, the church used to run along the Mall and face in an east-west direction.
Okay.
So the shrine that you now find today to Our Lady inside the door of the church, that used to be the place where the high altar of the church was situated.
Okay.
When they put on the huge extension, they had to reorientate the church in a north-south direction, and so the altar was changed. And the altar that was there in 1813 was now too small for the huge extension. So they took the 1813 altar down and have now resituated it to the left of the main altar, and it's now a side altar in the church.
On the top end down there.
Yeah.
Okay. That altar was here.
That altar was here. It's 200 years old. They're more than 200 years old.